And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Each year, the TD Ready Challenge invites eligible organizations to submit applications that offer solutions for a problem statement that is connected to one of the 4 drivers of change in the TD Ready commitment. We begin today's Open Connection with TD Manager of Strategic Initiative and Social Impact, Alicia Rose.
So I've been with TD for the past 3 years. I joined as a member of the Global Corporate Citizenship team. Global Corporate Citizenship really is a fancy way of saying how we do our work. So how we work from a business lens, from a philanthropy lens, and our people. We have 85,000 employees, and many of them are really interested in how they can volunteer and get engaged in community. So I've been part of this team for the past 3 years, and we recently in 2018 launched what we call the TD Ready Commitment, which is our new global corporate citizenship strategy. And part of that was the TD Ready Challenge. And that was an opportunity to look at how we could address some of the more pressing social issues with innovative and new approaches. So that's been running since 2018, and I feel really lucky to be a part of this delivery of this program.
Now, yourself, was it hard when of course, with any organization, when they launch a new program, sometimes it's hard to get a community buy-in. Did TD have that challenge?
TD has a long history of doing work in the community, as well as a lot of philanthropic support. So that wasn't new. I think what was new was the rollout of TD Ready Commitment and looking at where our priority areas focused on. We have 4 priority areas that we really think we call them our interconnected drivers, and that's how they work together to make positive impact into the community. So we worked a bit to socialize that, but I do think there was a real appetite for organizations to be able to engage with us around innovation, pilot programs, and new approaches to addressing kind of well-known issues. So TD Ready Challenge is a North American initiative, and it looks to, as I said, address kind of the pressing social issues that affect us on both sides of the border. And it might show up in different ways in different communities, but really it does affect us across North America. And so what we do with the Ready Challenge is we invite organizations to provide a solution to a problem statement that we put out annually. And when we look at those solutions, we evaluate them. It goes through a series of evaluations, and we select what we think are the strongest applications that we can align ourselves with and we can best support as an organization. Every year we contribute $10 million Canadian to TD Ready Challenge, and we have winners kind of on both sides of the border.
Now, were you part of the committee that helped select that first winner in 2018?
I was not on the committee in 2018. I was a member in 2019. It is a very, very difficult process to go through and evaluate. We have many, many members of our team in both US and Canada helping us go through the evaluation process. And it culminates with executives from both sides of the border, looking at our top finalists and making those final selections. This year we had over 1,300 applicants. So that was a lot to choose from, and a lot of really, really great solutions were put forward, and we narrowed it down to the 15 winners this year. We look for the impacts that this proposal could make. We look for the alignment for what we're trying to achieve. So we put out that problem statement, and we really want to see a strong alignment to that kind of response to that problem statement. We also look at the feasibility. We are really interested in pilot projects and new and innovative projects, but we also want to know that this is something that would likely be delivered on. And finally, we also look for who organizations are partnering with. This year, we put a call out for organizations to address the disproportionate impacts we're seeing in certain populations and communities to COVID-19. And we want to ensure that the organizations that are recipients of this funding are either working are currently a member of or working with members of the populations that they're looking to serve to ensure that they're doing it in a really meaningful and authentic way.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Today, COVID-19 and its consequences have created a remarkable climate of uncertainty that has rippled through all aspects of our society. Several studies have shown that the significant impacts are already being felt across North America, though not all people are experiencing these effects equally. Let us return to the conversation with Alicia Rose.
As we were looking to launch the Ready Challenge this year is when COVID really started to show up in our communities. And at that point, we said, we have to address this. We have to pivot the focus and the funding to look at not just the immediate impacts of COVID-19, but we want a long-term, sustainable, thoughtful recovery from this. And it's not just a health issue, it's a social issue, it's an economic issue, So we're looking at how do we pivot our problem statement to ensure that we're seeing solutions that will help us bounce back from this in an equitable manner. We've all been impacted. There's no escaping that. But we do know that certain populations have just been devastated. And so we want to have an opportunity to partner with and fund solutions that will help us all recover equitably. So when we were looking at communities that were disproportionately impacted by COVID, at the time of formulating the problem statement, we were seeing growing evidence of, populations living in remote communities, Indigenous and First Nations, Black communities, those who are disabled. We were seeing certain populations that were feeling the impacts even deeper than others. And so certainly Indigenous and First Nations rose to the top, unfortunately, as one of those populations that have been impacted. And it's for a variety of reasons. As I said, this pandemic has affected us across health, across social, across economic platforms. And so there's a mixture of Indigenous communities that are living in remote populations and having inaccessible access to healthcare. There is, the question of fresh food and produce delivery. There's questions of general healthcare based on the per capita of healthcare workers. So we knew that at least one, and it turned out to be, I think, 3 of our recipients would be ones that addressed the gaps that were facing Indigenous and First Nation populations, and to see what we could do to create that equitable access to healthcare, and things such as, PPE and lab results and all of those, even the physical aspects, to help these populations recover in a more equitable way. Like COVID didn't create these issues, it exacerbated issues that already existed. And so unfortunately, this was just kind of the lens to amplify what already existed and what some of us unfortunately already knew. I do think this focus on some of the issues that populations are facing has served to maybe open the eyes of broader populations to understand the inequality and lack of access that some populations are facing. And I think that's a good thing. I think that gives us opportunity to try and find more solutions together. I keep saying that we're only going to get through this together. And so the more that people are aware of the issues that their neighbors and communities are facing, the better.
It seems that TD has kind of broadened that word to include a lot more. Is that right?
I mean, I think when we look at the concept of corporate citizenship, and not to get, too high level, but I think it's multifaceted. We know from a moral and ethical perspective, this is the work that we should be doing. But quite frankly, this is the work that our customers expect that we should be doing. There's an expectation from the general public, and I think rightfully so, that the organizations that they, spend their dollars with or engage with are doing their best to do good work in the communities that they live, work, and play in. And so we answer to customers, we answer to the communities that we work in. And so on top of being the right thing to do, I think there's a general expectation that we would get involved in the best way that we can to get everyone through this. We were really delighted to provide a grant to UBC, University of British Columbia, their project around remote community drone transport initiative. And it is a mouthful, but really the concept around it is acknowledging that there are First Nations communities that don't have access to healthcare in the same way that other populations might. And so they're looking at piloting a program to examine, can we utilize drone technology to bring in physical items to help increase access to healthcare in certain communities that are remote in the BC area. So we were really excited to look at partnering around this pilot project to see what was feasible and to see what might come out of it. We provided them a grant of 750,000 Canadian, and they'll be looking at delivering of this pilot over the next 2 years. And we'll see what the outcomes are. But I think the intention is, let's see how we can make this work so we can replicate this through other remote communities, not just across BC, but across Canada and possibly across North America.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In an 1879 article published in The Lancet, the authors talk about the transmission of medical knowledge over the telephone and conducting doctor's appointments through the telephone in lieu of office visits. Let us return to the conversation with Dr. Pavlovich.
So I'm a clinical professor in the Department of Family Practice at UBC. That's my academic clinical role, affiliation with the university. And my clinical work is with CFTK-TV Family Services, which is based out of Prince George. In my clinical role, Robert, over the years, I've worked in many rural, remote, Indigenous communities. And one of my current roles, in addition to that, is with the Rural Coordination Center of BC, otherwise known as the RCCBC. And I lead the telehealth sector there and have done so for some time, and or the virtual health sector. And in my doctor job, so to speak, with CFTK-TV Family Services, we started work about 2010, starting to put together a new model of care to support remote communities that CFTK-TV Family Services supports. And so virtual health was part of that. And over the years, an interest of mine, as you read different initiatives that are happening around the world, has been with respect to drone technology. So one of the things that's always frustrated me is the lack of access to so many things for remote communities. So a community like Fort Babine or Tackle Landing or up in the Nisga'a Nation, how do you get things there in a timely way beyond the historical way of driving things in or flying things in? Because we know that, for example, this time of year, there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of tough weather conditions. Roads are bad. Planes, aircraft can't fly. People actually get killed, delivering the mail. And so, is there a better way? And as drone technology has been taking off, so to speak, it's advancing, and its capabilities are advancing. And so there are those in our province, nationally and internationally, have started to really start the journey, looking at drone technology, how it might integrate into supporting remote communities. And so a lot of the work that I do is that's an interest of mine, because I support remote communities, and specifically remote Indigenous communities. And my work with UBC and my work at the RCCBC kind of all came together recently, especially during the pandemic, where there were glaring gaps in what a remote Indigenous community could access or couldn't access. And so technologies such as drones have started to become of great interest to many to help to narrow some of these gaps. A community member develops symptoms that are concerning for COVID. Healthcare provider does one of those swabs that we've all seen on TV or had one ourselves. We know how uncomfortable they are. What do you do with that swab once you have it? Say you're in Tackle Landing. Say you're in the NAS. Say you're in a place where you don't have the ability to take that swab and actually analyze it for COVID. And what we know is that many community members had to wait many days to get an answer to a COVID swab. Somebody had to, say, journey with the COVID swab or swabs and go to a larger center like Terrace, like Prince George, to have the swab analyzed. And in doing so, there's risk in that. And there are dangerous roads. If you're traveling down hundreds of kilometers of logging road in January and February, that's not without considerable risk. And so there's also the time factor, the delay in knowing, just for a COVID swab.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Through innovative drone technology, UBC's Remote Communities Drone Transport Initiative will test the feasibility of enhancing access to healthcare services such as lab, pharmacy, and supplies for First Nations communities disproportionately affected by COVID-19 pandemic. In this final segment of Open Connection, Dr. Pavlovich shares why this is so important.
The question to bear with respect to drones is can that clinical need in an isolated Indigenous community be supported by new technology, working with partners such as the University of British Columbia, with an Indigenous community, with a non-Indigenous community, with health authorities, with other agencies like Cares County Family Services, to understand how we could work together to learn about drone technology as it interrelates with healthcare provision, supply chains, things like that in these remote sites. That's really the fundamental question. And that's the opportunity here, is to start that journey in northern British Columbia. In the early part of the pandemic, it was about getting testing equipment and getting protective equipment. Now we're into a vaccination rollout strategy that's just starting. And we know that and some of these vaccines, of course, are very delicate in how they have to be handled, have to be kept at certain temperatures. And it just by your remoteness can impact what options you have for vaccines. And so we're hoping that we'll have easier to handle and manage and distribute vaccines. But the question is, we still run into the same historical transportation issues. What we know is, drone technology is in its early stages of development. And, there are electrically powered drones, there are gas powered drones. There are, the capacity for what a drone can carry. Knowing that drone technology is really in its infancy stage, what we need to do is to really start the journey of not getting too advanced in about the drone itself, because that's going to continue to evolve. So how far a drone can go today, what it can pick up and transport to another community, that's all going to change with time. And the first step is working on the ground, so to speak, or literally, with community members to develop the infrastructure to support drones in a base. So we take the Stalatin First Nation, for example, who we're partnering with in this community. So Chief Robert Michelle is leading this initiative with the Stalatin First Nation, and what it needs to be considered in the indigenous community of the Stalatin First Nation to accommodate the drone, to operationalize it in terms of manpower, in terms of infrastructure. And then in the other neighboring community, non-indigenous community of Fraser Lake, which we're partnering with in this project, we have to do the same thing. And then we have to understand with that arrangement, what are the logistics of allowing a drone to leave Stalatin, go to Fraser Lake, and then return. And just those simple steps require a lot of hard work and homework to get that right. And so in this grant proposal, in this work, we're partnering, as you read from the briefing, with the Stalatin First Nation, with Chief Robert Michelle, with the village of Fraser Lake, to start to embark on that journey. It's a considerable amount of money, but in the realm of doing big projects, and where expensive technology is involved, and people and all the other bits that have to support a project, it doesn't go very far, as you know, Robert. And so it won't go very long. And so what will we learn in this the duration of this project, and then what will this take us into the future? How will this take us into the future? And I'd like to see this work not only in the short term of this project, but also maturing and integrating with a longer term vision about how we continue to work with our partners to advance and implement drone technology into healthcare. So you might imagine one day ambitiously thinking how we could use drones to move from Prince George to Terrace and back. How we might go from Terrace over to Masset and back. How we might be able to get up to Stewart and Lac-Oulam and Hartley Bay and Kitkatla. That's what we need to do. That's the vision. How can we distribute resources, medical resources, whether it's laboratory equipment and testing equipment, or whether it's pharmaceuticals. We're embarking on a journey that potentially could really transform how a supply chain looks and is operationalized in these remote sites.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.